There is evidence that salmon farming has an adverse impact on the marine environment. How do you think the economic benefits of fish farming should be balanced against the detrimental effects on the environment?
Fish farming is a difficult topic, just insofar as that it's so important economically to certain regions of Scotland. So obviously up the west coast, huge amount of fish farming compared to other parts. So it's really difficult to sort of judge the impact economically on local areas across the whole. So from the Scottish Conservatives' point of view, we really do recognise the importance of the fish farming industry to jobs and local economies. And so we do remain supportive of the industry, but we really acknowledge that changes need to be made. There needs to be more environmental protection, less pesticides getting into the seas. And how we do this, whether that is direct enforcement, incentives, I don't know the answer to that, and I'll be honest that I don't know, and I don't think anyone actually has a clear answer at the moment of how it's done. All we do recognise is it needs to be done, and that will need input from stakeholders such as those who run the businesses, those involved in marine and environmental protection, to see how we can bring it together to ensure that we keep the economic importance of fish farms to Scotland as a whole and certain communities in particular, while also balancing the impact that they are having on the environment.
It's really important to acknowledge the economic contribution of fish farming, in particular salmon industry, to Scotland's. It is undoubtedly a really important industry to our country. Exports generate hundreds of millions of pounds each year, and the sector employs thousands and thousands of people. So I think that whatever solutions we come up with we have to bring the people that the industry employs to the table, and the companies that are fish farming to the table, and make sure that the economy, the contribution that it makes to the economy continues. And I think there's good examples internationally of where sustainable or alternatives, potentially sustainable alternatives, are being tried. A lot of them aren't necessarily that economically viable at the moment, but I think we should certainly be looking at those international examples and trying them in Scotland as a potential answer to this problem. So I think we have to look internationally, we have to look globally, and we have to start coming up with solutions quickly. And we shouldn't be afraid to do that, even if it isn't economically viable in the first instance, because we do need those solutions, and they will become economically viable eventually if we start working on them now and innovating.
Thank you very much. Mark, I'll come to you next. I think I remember you saying that you wanted to phase out open cage fish farming. So if you do that, aren't you going to destroy lots of rural industries on which rural economies depend?
No, and actually I think if we're smart about the way that we regulate, we're smart about the way that we offer licenses for fish farms, we could actually see more innovation in technology. I mean, this is a hugely profitable industry. The price of salmon continues to go up. The global market for salmon continues to go up. What they're doing in Norway is they're saying, okay, you can expand into new sites, but only if you drop open cage, open pen technology, which has been responsible for a lot of the pollution problems that we've seen, a lot of the issues with parasite transfer, a lot of the issues with genetic mixing with wild fish. So companies are actually investing, they are actually growing the salmon farming industry in Norway, but they're investing millions and millions into technology that is closed containment, and the bar is high. And if you don't come forward with an innovative solution to the problems, you don't get a consent, you don't get a license to put a fish farm in place, you don't get a consent to expand your industry. It's unfortunate, but what we do see is Norwegian-based multinationals then dumping their open pen technology in Scotland and in Iceland. Actually, I was in Iceland a few years ago, and they were saying, we've got the same problem. We've got open cage technology being dumped by Norwegian firms. Why is this happening when Norway looks pretty good? So, this is an industry that has to live within its ecological limits. And unfortunately, for the government to support a target of doubling the size of the sector without a clear route map to protect the marine environment, which is so essential for the industry in the first place, is just a recipe for disaster. And unfortunately, the outcome of the 2 inquiries in Scottish Parliament is that, in my opinion, the Scottish Government has not taken on board the seriousness of the crisis that we face within salmon farming.
So there's an obvious point to come to you, Paul. Has the Scottish Government been soft on the fish farming industry? Should you be doing more?
Well, I suppose I should hold my hands up, Rob, as you may recall, as the Minister took the Agriculture and Fisheries Act through Scottish Parliament in 2013 that put in place the current regulatory environment, which itself was a toughening up of the rules, but clearly from what other colleagues are saying, they don't feel it's gone far enough. I suppose the first thing to acknowledge is the industry has, a significant economic footprint, and as Islands Minister, I'm very conscious of the impact it has on our islands, including communities that Alistair represents, but others all the way down the west coast, as Sue has said, is a very important sector for local jobs. So we have to get this right. We have to get this balance right, because it is about trying to do something that sustains local communities, but at the same time doing it with respect to the environment. And if we haven't got the balance right, then clearly we would have to look at what more we could do. But Mark is right to recognise there are models that can work in terms of recirculation facilities. We've got some in Scotland already, actually, in terms of hatcheries, such as at Loch Eilert, Maui. Family Marine Harvest built a very large hatchery there, which is entirely kind of self-contained, and even uses sludge for anaerobic digestion, I think, that comes from the bottom of the fish cages there. So there are some solutions that are reducing the impact already, but in terms of open cage technology, I think the vision the industry had when I was certainly back as Environment Minister dealing with this sector was to try and go further offshore, because the evidence suggests, Barra being a good example, there's a site, a Mowi site in Barra, which has virtually no sea lice infestation, or at least when I was last responsible for the sector, had a very low level of sea lice infestation because of the strong flow of water through the site, and the high energy site it had meant that the fish were naturally quite healthy. They were good quality fish, and there was very minimal need for use of peroxides and other chemicals. So it may well be about being a bit smarter about where we put cage technology, if there is continued use of open cage technology. We obviously put in place a system of fisheries management areas to try and improve coordination of tackling sea lice infestation and reducing the contagion, if you like, between different areas where fish farming was happening, and that's important. But clearly, I've not been privy to the parliamentary inquiries, Rob, so I don't know the detail of what's been suggested there about steps that could be taken to improve the performance of the sector. But I'm sure, because of the interaction I've had with the sector, that they are keen to address the issues that they have in terms of public perception, because any industry can only continue when it has a strong social license. And for the industry to obviously continue its good track record of exporting product from Scotland and indeed selling to the domestic market, it needs to prove to customers that it's taking these issues of welfare seriously. And obviously the interaction with the wild fishery is obviously important as well. So I'd certainly be supportive of working with industry to tighten up standards. But the other just final thing I would say is that we've got a real excellence in Scotland in research and development in aquaculture in terms of the Aquaculture Innovation Centre, the work that SAMS do at Arto in Argyll. We do have the intellectual capability in Scotland to actually improve the industry from within Scotland. I'd like to see, as we are seeing now, significant funds being invested in that.
Yeah, lots of questions about issues being raised by fish farming coming up in the chat. The use of acoustic deterrent devices, or the impact on wild salmon, use of pesticides, and so on. So what I take it from what you just said, that if you were a minister in the next government responsible for this, you wouldn't be phasing out open cage salmon farming. You'd be trying to improve it, but you wouldn't. Do you think doubling, which is what the industry and the government has backed them in doing, is it wants to doubling the industry, the size of the business is a good aim?
Well, I think if it could be done sustainably, Rob, then that's obviously a good outcome. But what I would say is that I'm sure my colleague Ben McPherson, as Environment Minister, wouldn't thank me for trying to tout for his job. But the point is, I think if we do find ourselves in a position where we're trying to manage that growth in the sector, it must be in partnership to try it. And the industry, I'm sure, understands that can only really expand if it's doing so in a way that's sustainable and addressing some of the the concerns that both the community, the environmental community, but also other interests such as wild fisheries have. So it's in contingent on good practice, but there is good practice. All we do need to do is make sure that is universal practice, not patchy as it is now.
Thanks so much. There's what a wealth of things are hidden in that word sustainable, and couldn't we all write essays on it? So Claudia, you agree with every word that Paula just said?
Well, I often work very well with Paul, as I do with Mark, and it's interesting that I think the two reports that came from the Rec Committee and my own Eclair Committee, which Mark and I are both on, show that these were really robust reports about the status quo, as I highlighted in my opening remarks. That's not an option, but really, I have to say that on this issue, I look back to the Aquaculture Bill, and one of the amendments that I took through was on having farm-by-farm reporting on sea lice. And at the time, I was told by the Scottish Government and also by some others, but not by the Green Party, that all was well. Now, I have to say that I think that the Scottish Salmon Producers Association, frankly, it is about perception, and they have to be forced. It just seems to me that they just only do things when they really think that they have to. Now, that's a bit of a sort of quick way of saying it, but quite honestly, that the fact that took so long for there to be farm-by-farm reporting, and all these arguments about commercial privacy and confidentiality were used. No, I'm sorry, that's just not good enough. And the same goes for the shocking mortality of salmon in the industry through sea lice and through other things that we don't have time to go into at the moment. But this is an animal welfare issue as well. And many people will have seen the films of salmon being eaten alive, and they will say, oh, well, this is only in some places. I'm sorry, I feel that this needs to be dealt with. If this was the sort of mortality that we had on land, on our farms with sheep and cows, then there would be a lot more of a fuss about it. And I think that we do need to note that that the same companies are working in Norway and looking much more towards closed containment. Both, I think it's Maui, they're now called, but Marine Harvest, are doing that. And I think for the sake of our seas and the seabed and the salmon and the wild salmon, and for the jobs of the future, we have to get this right. And really, there needs to be a significant amount of change if this is going to proceed.
Thank you very much. I've still got two more to go to, I think. Alistair, fish farming is obviously a very important issue in Shetland, a very important industry in Shetland. Should it be better controlled, or should it just carry on expanding?
Well, it can always be better controlled. That's not something that's unique to fish farming. Just before I come to that point, though, we've spoken just about salmon. There's a lot more to aquaculture than salmon. You've got mussels, you've got trout, and these are all sectors that have a massive economic significance in communities like the ones that I represent. Particularly if you look at the Shetland industry, how it operates, you've got significant numbers of people, three figures, working in the Cook processing plant in Mid-Yale. Now, if you took that away, you would really need to go some to replace these jobs. And that's the story that you find replicated throughout the Northern Isles, and I think probably throughout the West Highlands as well. I think there's a lot more that you can be doing here. I think the issues around stocking density and good husbandry, Paul spoke about, deeper water and faster water being something that would contribute to healthier fish, and we know that that's the case. And there's a lot that we can all do as individuals by virtue of the power we have as consumers. So, you know, certification standards when it comes to marketing the salmon, the mussels, whatever else it's going to be, allow us all to make informed choices. But, you know, these, it comes back again to taking a holistic look at this. The money that comes into Shetland and to Orkney through aquaculture is money which is very, in large part, recycled here. So, you know, it's not just, as somebody said in chat, Mac jobs. There are very good, well-paid, highly skilled technical and professional jobs associated with aquaculture in the Northern Isles. That keeps the social mix that you need to have. And it keeps money going into local shops, going into post offices, going into other local businesses as well. So, you know, tread carefully on this, please, if you will, because regardless of how it may look to you from your community, from our end of the telescope, in our communities, this is massively important. And, you know, I actually agreed with quite a lot that Mark said about the carrot rather than the stick in terms of improvement. That's how industry can be persuaded to develop and to change with appropriate regulation coming from government. And rather than setting ourselves arbitrary targets for expanding or for cutting, I would like to see that approach taken to the heart of regulation for aquaculture.
I've got to agree a lot with what Mark said. I think that is the way to deal with it. He's absolutely right. The displacement from Norway and where the real profit goes back to, rather than a domestic industry. And if we are planning downsizing, we need to start thinking about what's going to go in place. Alistair makes good points, the impact of the loss of jobs there, but we need to look forward and think about what we can do to regenerate our communities dependent on farming. What concerned me a few years ago when the discard ban came in, the plan was that to double the size of the salmon farming, and it would be fed from the discard fish. Well, I think the big question there really is if the government policy is to grow the salmon, how sustainable is it, and what is the carbon footprint equated to that? But just to finish off, Mark made some very good points, and I'd like to see them developed further.